The night my ex-wife came to my farmhouse, she was standing barefoot in the rain, holding a torn suitcase in one hand and trying not to cry in front of me. I almost closed the door, not because I hated her, but because I knew one look into those tired eyes could bring back everything I had spent 12 years trying to bury. She had once been the woman I promised to love for the rest of my life. Now she had been thrown out of another man's house because he had found someone younger, and somehow, after all those years, she had come back to the one person she had once walked away from. Then she looked at me with trembling lips, and asked the question that broke something inside my chest. If I were yours, would you be ashamed of me? If you believe people deserve kindness, forgiveness, and second chances, please take a moment to like this story, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel. Sometimes the person standing outside the door of our hearts is not asking for a perfect life. They are simply asking if there is still a place where they can feel human. My name is Samuel, and I had built a quiet life on the edge of a small farming community in Tennessee. My days were simple. I repaired old furniture, tended a modest vegetable garden, and spent most evenings sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee while the sun disappeared behind the fields. 12 years earlier, I had been married to Rebecca. We had not been wealthy, and our marriage had not been perfect, but I had loved her with the stubborn kind of love that believes problems can be repaired if two people are willing to stay and work. Rebecca had eventually decided she wanted something different. She left me for a man named Jonathan, a successful contractor from Nashville, who promised her a beautiful house, expensive vacations, and a life far removed from the little farmhouse she had grown tired of. I signed the divorce papers with shaking hands and never begged her to stay. I simply watched her drive away, carrying half of everything we had built together. For years, I heard almost nothing about her. Then, one autumn afternoon, my sister Martha called and told me Rebecca's marriage had fallen apart. Jonathan had left her for a younger woman named Grace, and according to Martha, Rebecca had been forced to leave the house with almost nothing. I remember staring at the old wooden table in my workshop after hearing those words. A strange mixture of anger and sadness moved through me. Part of me thought, now she knows what it feels like. Another part remembered the woman who used to fall asleep beside me while rain tapped against our bedroom window. I told myself I didn't care anymore. I was lying. 3 weeks later, Rebecca appeared at my door during a storm. Her coat was soaked through, her hair was tangled by the wind, and the suitcase beside her looked like it contained the remains of an entire life. She told me she had nowhere to go. Her friends had stopped answering her calls. Her family lived several states away, and she had spent the previous night sitting in her car because she was too ashamed to ask anyone for help. I wanted to ask why she had come to me after everything that happened. Instead, I stepped aside and told her she could sleep in the spare room. The first few days were painfully quiet. Rebecca moved through the house, like a ghost apologizing, whenever she used a towel, touched a plate, or walked across the floor. One morning, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, staring at an old photograph from our marriage. She quickly turned it face down. I didn't say anything. I understood that some memories hurt too much to explain. She eventually found work at a small bakery in town, and I gave her a few shelves in my workshop to repair furniture and sell handmade pieces. Slowly she began to laugh again, not often, but enough that I noticed. One evening, while we stood outside the barn watching the last light disappear across the fields, Rebecca finally told me everything. Jonathan had gradually stopped seeing her as his wife and started treating her as an embarrassment. He criticized her clothes, her age, her body, and the lines that had appeared around her eyes. Then came the younger woman. Rebecca said she had spent months trying to become someone else just to keep a man who had already stopped loving her. The final night, Jonathan told her he wanted a new life and that she was no longer part of it. She said the cruelest part wasn't losing him. It was realizing she had spent years believing that being abandoned meant she was no longer worthy of being loved. I didn't know what to say, so I told her the truth. I said that she had made choices that hurt me deeply, and I would never pretend those years didn't matter. But I also told her that a person's worst decision should not become their permanent identity. Rebecca began crying, and for the first time since she arrived, she stopped apologizing for being broken. Months passed. Winter covered the Tennessee fields in silver frost, and Rebecca became part of the rhythm of my life. We worked together, argued over little things, laughed over burnt biscuits, and sometimes sat silently on the porch, without needing to fill the quiet. I noticed that she had changed, but so had I. I no longer saw her as the woman who had abandoned me. I saw a woman who had fallen, learned, and somehow found the courage to stand again. Then one Sunday morning after church, Rebecca stopped beside my truck. Her hands were trembling. She looked at me and asked if I had ever forgiven her completely. I told her forgiveness wasn't a switch that turned off pain. It was something I had chosen again and again until the pain no longer controlled me. She lowered her eyes and whispered that she was afraid I would always see her as the woman who left. I reached for her hand and told her that I saw her as Rebecca, the woman standing in front of me now. A year later, we were sitting on the same porch where I had once spent so many lonely evenings. There was no grand wedding, no expensive ring, and no promise that our lives would suddenly become perfect. We simply chose each other again, carefully this time, with open eyes and older hearts. Rebecca had asked me once if I would be ashamed of her if she were mine. I finally understood the answer. I wasn't ashamed of her scars. I was proud of the woman who had survived them. Sometimes love does not return wearing the same face it had before. Sometimes it comes back older, humbler, and carrying a suitcase full of mistakes. And sometimes the greatest miracle isn't getting back what you lost. It is discovering that forgiveness can build something stronger than the thing that was broken. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes people can change, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these stories reach people who may be quietly struggling with loneliness, rejection, or the fear that their past has made them impossible to love. Before we end, I want you to leave one special comment. Everyone deserves a second chance. Maybe someone reading your words tonight needs that reminder more than you know. Because Rebecca taught me something I will never forget. Being left behind does not mean you are worthless. Sometimes, it simply means the wrong person finally made room for the right chapter of your life.